Hey guys, it's Tori, and today I am here to announce Ancientsathon. This is a readathon that will be taking place throughout the month of June, hosted by both me and Jennifer Brooks. And the whole purpose of this readathon is to help push people, including myself, to read literature from between the beginning of literature, so basically Gilgamesh, all the way up until the 17th century, so 1699. I know, this is a huge swath of time, but I feel like this is a huge swath of time where it's hard to really get into a lot of the literature from this time. The language is very different. There's not really many novels or anything like it. It's mostly poetry, stories, a lot of nonfiction and philosophical type works. And I decided to host this readathon because I am no longer an English major. Originally, when I started college, I was an English major. However, I have recently chosen to change to psychology within the past year, and I'm very glad with that choice. I'm very pleased with it. I think it's what's best for me right now, but I do really miss how my English major was able to push me to read things I otherwise wouldn't really reach for. And since I don't have that anymore, I wanted to find a way to really push myself to pick up this type of literature. So that's what this readathon is for, and hopefully some of you guys will get inspired as well. And if you already just love this type of literature, hopefully this will give you a good excuse to get to some things that maybe you haven't and you really want to. So like I said, this will be going throughout the month of June. We will have a live show on the 1st at 8 o'clock Eastern time, and we will have another live at the very end of the month on the 31st at the same time. The first one will be on Jennifer's channel, and then the second one, the one at the end of the month, will be on my channel. So be looking out for those. Those times may change a little bit, and we'll let you know. I'm going to be searching for a new job between now and then, and so I'm not really sure what my hours will look like and if I need to make adjustments, but we will be sure to let you know if those changes need to be made, specifically on Instagram, and then I'll probably try to mention, maybe do a short little video to announce it on here just so we can make sure as many people as possible are aware of that. We also, of course, have some prompts as well as a group read that I'll get into right now. These are just for people who want to. Really, the main purpose of this is to get people to read at least something from this huge swath of time that we tend not to reach for as much unless there's a read along or things like that. But for those who really like prompts, like the challenge, like me, here are the prompts. Also, you can double and triple up on these prompts, I should mention before we get started. But anyway, let's just get right into them. So we have 5 prompts total. The first one is a little bit tricky, especially for this swath of time, and that is to read something written by a female author. So I have a few recommendations for you. Not all of these people I have read from. I just did some research, so you don't have to stress as much if you want to just read one of these. The first one that I have read a little bit by is Marie de France. She wrote many lays, which are kind of like fairy tales or short stories told in poetry form, and they are really wonderful. She was the first to write down a lot of the Arthurian legends, and she's just a really fascinating writer, and one I've wanted to read a lot more by. I've read Landville by her, and I think it was called The Nightingale by her, and both I really enjoyed. So definitely one I would recommend. The next is, of course, Sappho, who was a Greek poet who is known for having been lesbian, and she writes a lot of homosexual poetry and is very well known for that, and just really beautiful poetry, so you can read some of her works if you haven't already. And then the other 2 I want to suggest I have not read, so I'm going to do my best to pronounce their names because they're a little bit of a doozy, but I'm also going to be reading them off because I don't want to get them wrong. So we first of all have Enheduanna, who was a Sumerian, I want to say like temple priestess or something, and she wrote some poetry at the time. I believe they title her work The Sumerian Temple Hymns, and I haven't read anything by her, but she's one of the earliest, not only female writers, but one of the earliest poets that we know about. So that's one you should definitely check out, and that I would like to check out, hopefully during the month. Next, we have a French writer, and her name is Christine de Pizan, and she wrote a book called The Book of the City of Ladies, which I believe is about a city where the men have left or all been killed. I don't really know, but it's all full of women. And so I don't remember exactly what time period what this was. I will put it somewhere on the screen so that you can see, but she is one that really sounds fascinating to me. And the last one, if you want to break outside of Europe a little bit, we have Murasaki Shikibu. I totally butchered that, I apologized. But I believe she was in the I'm not sure. Again, I will put the years for her on the screen. I should have written them down. But anyway, she wrote a huge book called The Tale of, I don't know if it's Genie or Genji, I don't know how to pronounce it. But this is a book, it's humongous. So this is definitely going to be a task, but maybe you can find at least fragments of some of her work. I believe that historians think that she was a handmaiden or something like that for one of the ruling families, and however, her name wasn't actually what I just said. Her name was something else, but they don't really know for sure. So they just have guesses about who she was. But anyway, she's one that I have my eye on, that I really want to read her ginormous work, but it's over 1,000 pages, so I probably won't get to it during this readathon. But I definitely, as I have researched more about her, I really want to try to get to some of her stuff at some point. Up next, we have a bit of an easier one, which is just to read a play. Any play from this huge swath of time. You have a lot of options. Some of my personal favorites, if you want somewhere to start. One is Medea by Euripides. This is a collection of a bunch of his plays, but Medea is a wonderful, wonderful, eerie, very deep play that I think a lot of people would enjoy. Definitely one about more of an anti-hero kind of a person, but it has a lot of passion, a lot of emotion, and I think a lot of people would really enjoy it. In fact, I think it is a good place to start with Greek plays. And of course, you can always go the Shakespeare route, and if you don't know much about his plays, don't know where to start, a few that I really like, my personal favorite is Richard III, although that's not going to be everyone's favorite. It is a history play, which tend to be hit or miss for people, but that's one I really, really enjoy. Some others I really, really like. I really enjoy Macbeth, and that's a shorter one by Shakespeare, so that might work well for a lot of people. I enjoy, as far as his comedies go, Much Ado About Nothing and Twelfth Night are two of my favorites, so I definitely suggest those, especially if you like She's the Man, the movie. That one is based actually on Twelfth Night, so you'll see a few similarities there, and that one's a really fun one. Another play that I really, really love is Volpone, I believe is how you pronounce it, by Ben Jonson, and this one is a comedy about an old man who's just kind of a little twerp basically, and pretends to be dying to kind of lure in and trick these three men who really want his fortune, and they kind of go head to head. And then we also have his servant who is kind of there like leading the three people on, and that one's definitely a lot of fun. If you haven't heard of it, it is one that I really liked, that I read in school and just have always remembered. So prompt number 3 is nonfiction, and again, there's a lot of options for this. You can read people's letters. For example, the letters of Thomas More is one that I'm intrigued by. I've read a few of his letters and I just really like his writing, even though, you know, I have some not great feelings about him because of what he said about Richard III, but I'll forgive him because he does have lovely writing and it's interesting to read his letters. So yes, you could read letters from Thomas More or from anyone else for that matter. Another option is The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. This is a philosophical type text. A lot of people think it's actually kind of satirical, like Niccolo Machiavelli didn't really mean everything he wrote in this, which I kind of believe, because if you read some of his quotes and comments on republics, he clearly believed in the idea of a republic, so of course he doesn't really believe in this kind of tyrannical leader, but there's still some interesting points throughout this book, and I think the writing is pretty accessible, so this is one that I would suggest. And then you can also, of course, always go for actually mostly historical texts. For example, History of the Kings of Britain by Geoffrey of Monmouth. This is a book just about the history of the rulers of Britain from the perspective of Geoffrey of Monmouth as a historian. Of course, take everything in this with a grain of salt, as with most of the histories you'd read during this time, but it is one that I'm actually very interested in. I haven't read this one, but it's one I've long been interested in, partly because it is the first written down mention of Merlin, and I'm a huge King Arthur fan. So anyway, there's that. Another one that I haven't read yet, but that is really intriguing to me, is the Agricola, I don't know if I said that right, and the Germania by Tacitus. This is I want to say it's Roman. Yes, a Roman historian describing the British Isles, and it's actually the first detailed description we have of the British Isles, and then also describing the Germanic tribes. So this is one that really intrigues me as well. I don't know if I'll get to it in this particular readathon, but I really would like to get to it at some point. The next prompt is to read something myth or legend based, so this can be anything. This can be something like Ovid's Metamorphoses, which is kind of our best account of many of the Greek myths, as well as any plays like Oedipus Rex by Sophocles, Medea once again by Euripides. You could read any of those types of things. Another good one is the Odyssey or the Iliad, which is very much connected to Greek myth. You could also go for Arthurian legends if you would like, with Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I have a long way to go before I really feel like I know a lot about Arthurian legends, but this is one that I really enjoyed, that I feel like it's very short, and I feel like most people will get into it and find interest in it, so that's one you could try out. You could also read Marie de France for this. Like I mentioned, a lot of her lays are about Arthurian legends, so you can try that. You could try Le Morte d'Arthur if you want to take that beast on. That one's by Sir Thomas Malory. You could also, Jennifer and I decided, you can read collections that were written down more recently of myths and legends that were originally oral tradition, if that makes sense. So any collections of like Norse myths, collections of Celtic mythology, of Greek myths. I would even accept if you wanted to read Percy Jackson's Greek gods or Percy Jackson's Greek heroes, not the Percy Jackson series, but those two kind of separate little collections of Greek myths told from Percy Jackson's point of view. Definitely you can read those. I feel like, I mean, it's still teaching you what the stories were, so I would count it. Anything like that. It can't be a retelling though. It has to be just an actual telling of just the actual stories that have just been written down after years of being told through oral tradition. For example, I think I'm probably going to reach for Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology that he recently came out with in the past couple years, I believe, as I know very little about Norse mythology, so I'm very excited to get into that. And prompt number 5, the final prompt, and then we'll talk about the group read, is, I'm so excited about this one actually, is to read something that's referenced in one of your favorite books. So for those of you who love classics, especially Victorian lit, there's a lot of references to Shakespeare, to the Bible, to all sorts of things, and we are challenging you to read one of those things that you know is referenced in one of your favorite books, or perhaps you have read a retelling of a certain myth or a legend. For example, Circe by Madeline Miller. If you've read that and really liked it, but you've never actually read the Odyssey, you could read the Odyssey for that. Or with that same book, with Circe, you can also read like Medea, because Medea is mentioned in Circe. So that's one example. I'm also going to just mention a couple of things that are regularly mentioned in a lot of novels, especially Victorian, but also more recently. First of all, you could read something like a book from the Bible. You don't need to read the whole Bible necessarily, but if you, for example, the story of Esther, if you have a book that follows Esther, you could read that. You could read Job. I know Job is mentioned a lot. You could read Genesis, or at least a few chapters of Genesis that you know are referenced in one of your favorite books. Two others that I know are mentioned quite a lot in other books include Paradise Lost by John Milton. This is one I haven't read the full thing, but it's one that I have enjoyed what I have read of it, the fragments I've read of it. Another one that I feel like is referenced quite a bit is Dante's Divine Comedy, which if you are partaking in Jennifer's read-along of the Divine Comedy right now, that could be a perfect opportunity to make sure you finish it up in June, because I believe she's doing Paradiso in June, so that works perfect for this readathon. Okay, so those are the prompts, and now getting into the group read that we have decided on. It's one that I have never read before, not even parts of, but it's one I'm hoping to enjoy, and that is The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. This was originally published in 1678, which is right towards the end of our reading period, but I really have a lot of curiosity about this book. It's one that I know is mentioned in quite a few. It's one that's referenced a lot in many other books, including Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, which is one of my favorite books of all time. So this automatically kind of covers that challenge for me. I will be doing something else for that particular prompt, but this does technically cover as well. And it's not terribly long. I think it's just around 300 pages. Yep. So definitely not terribly long. We will be creating a Goodreads group that you can follow along with and discuss on there. I haven't quite done that yet, but as soon as I do, I will link it underneath this video. And then at the end of the month, we will be discussing this during our live show on the 31st, so definitely keep an eye out for that. And yes, that's the group read, and that is everything I believe I need to tell you about this great Ancientsathon experience that I'm so excited we're going to have together. Thank you so much for watching. I will also link Jennifer's announcement video down below in case you want more recommendations. She's a lot more well-versed in this type of literature than I am, so she probably has a lot more she can suggest that she has actually read. So keep that in mind. Again, I'll link that down below as soon as I'm able to. And yes, that should be everything. Let me know if you guys are participating. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you participate, even just a little bit. It's just going to be such a good time. And I will see you all again very soon. Happy reading. Bye.